Well, hello everybody, welcome back down into the dungeon. Today is day 22, I think, of this 30 and 30. You know, it looks like I might actually finish this thing out, which would be a first, I'm pretty sure. And, you know, I might just try and push it beyond that. 42 has always been a better number for me anyway. Few of you know why. Actually, on that note, what the heck, today, I've been kind of toying with the idea of sharing this stuff with you for a while anyway, but today I figured it's a little bit more of the getting to know you sort of videos to fill up this 30 and 30. Yeah, so many of you, well, a few of you, some of you, I know at least one of you, are fully aware that I am what you would call a bibliophile. I love books. I love reading books. I love the smell of books. There are few things that excite me as much as walking into a really old library or a used bookshop. Oh. Used bookstores, I think, are probably the best because you've got a much better chance of taking them home, getting to keep them. And I'm one of those freaks that if I like a book, I will read it on a number of occasions. Now, that said, there are a few books that I have read, probably damn near 20 plus times. One of them probably over 100 times. And they, in some ways, have really helped to define my character as much as my moving around the country and traveling around all of North America and just all of these things that have contributed to me becoming the person that I am. These books, some of them, were definitely huge parts of that. And to that end, I encourage anybody who wants to know me better and understand what makes Mr. Bear tick to take the time and read a few of these things. Now that said, I recognize that most people have no interest in reading anything anymore. So that's going to complicate things if you happen to be one of those people. If you're not, though, and like myself, you enjoy your literacy and look to expand your vocabulary on a frighteningly regular basis, you may enjoy the rest of the video. So stick around, and yeah, I will happily share with you some of the books that I've enjoyed the most over the last 43 years. Now, I think I should start with one of the books that has been the most influential in my life, and I don't want you to freak out as soon as you hear the title, because it's the only part of that whole, I'm going to get in trouble here, cult that I actually go for. I've looked a little further into it, didn't care for the rest of the books, don't care for a lot of the theories, but I think there is something to be said for Dianetics. It's a very interesting read. Now, that said, it took me probably 3 reads before I really understood the material, the subject material that they were presenting in that book. And I do find it fascinating, and it really did help me overcome a lot of the difficulties that I was facing in my earlier years. I was constantly doing things that, you know, when I sat back and I said, well, why the hell did I do that? It's like, well, that's not a decision I would choose to make. And there's a really funny story as to how I came to have that book in my life, so I figure, what's the point in having funny stories in your life if you're not going to share them with people? So I'm going to share them with you. Well, this one, anyway. As a younger man, I used to commute to and from downtown Vancouver back to North Surrey, where I lived, via the SkyTrain. For those of you who don't live in the greater Vancouver area, the SkyTrain is basically an L. If you don't know what an L is, it's basically an elevated train, part of the public transit system there. It was a brilliant idea that I think ultimately has failed and probably really helped to spread crime around the greater Vancouver area instead of kind of keeping it centralized to the few little areas that it was in. But anyway, that's totally not the point of the story. The point of the story is, one day I was commuting back from downtown Vancouver where I was working at the hotel. One of these days we'll go into jobs that I've done too. But anyway, where I was working at the hotel, and I was coming back and I was reading, what was I reading? I was reading Battlefield Earth by L. Ron Hubbard. And there's these people, and they're sitting in trench coats and suits, and they're looking at me like really weird from the other side and the other end of the SkyTrain car, and I'm just trying to ignore them. You know, you work in downtown Vancouver, you get used to dealing with weird people, and you know, if you look like me, you get used to people giving you funny looks. So I mean, it all kind of combines, right? But they're looking at me, and they're looking at the book, and they're looking at me, and they're looking at the book, and finally one of them walks up to me, and they're like, you know, I know this is gonna seem really strange, but we couldn't help but notice that you're reading a book by L. Ron Hubbard. I'm like, yes, yes I am. What of it? And they're like, well, we're court reporters, you know, just to give you some idea of what we're doing. And all day today, we spent in court, and one of the gentlemen who was on the stand was going off about Dianetics, which was written by L. Ron Hubbard. I'm just wondering if you've read it. I had to be honest and tell them, no, I've never even heard of that book before. I was busy reading science fiction, you know, as Battlefield Earth, if you're familiar with the horrible, absolutely terrible movie, John Travolta, I think, which is, he should be disappointed in that. But anyway, if you're familiar with the terrible movie, I assure you the book is better, but not much. But it is a little better. But I'd never heard of this, and to have someone approach me in such a fashion, you know, it became a goal. I had to find a copy of this book, and conveniently enough, you know, I went to a used bookstore where I found it for $5. Needless to say, took it home, tried to read it. Didn't get very far the first time. But like I said, it's one of those books you've got to read a few times. It's very much like a textbook. If you don't want to read it, you're not gonna read it. And I persevered. I made it through. I really didn't understand it, so I read it again, and like I said, I was sort of kind of understood it, and then I read it the third time, and well, a lot of things just kind of clicked and started to make sense. And all of a sudden, I felt a lot better about decisions that I knew I was making. Maybe I'm just it's my own personal experience with the book. I'm not saying it's going to be like that for everybody else, but clearly a lot of people have read it and had huge problems with it. But it helped me out. That is, I think, probably the most unusual way I've ever been introduced to a book. But it definitely made a huge difference in my life, and it's one of those little tiny things, one of those many little tiny things that have happened to me over the course of my life that just make me wonder, okay, well, you know, it's not so much that I firmly believe there is or isn't a God, but maybe, just maybe, there is some sort of divine energy that permeates all things and will actively help us towards our goals. I wanted to improve these aspects of myself, but I had no idea how to do it. Through reading this and analyzing myself and being painfully, brutally honest with myself, I was able to change a lot of things that I felt were truly very negative about my character, and I've been much happier ever since. I've bought over a dozen copies of that book, and ironically enough, they've all been $5 from a used bookstore. I've had them stolen from me. I've given them to people that I felt could use them more than I could at the time. And last time I packed up my books, I had 2 copies of the damn thing sitting around. But you know, when we unpacked them here, you think I could find a single one? Ha! Not a chance. Not a chance. But all the same, it made a huge difference in my life. So that is one of the books that, if you're into reading textbooky type things, might give you a slightly better understanding of who I am and how I tick. Now, the next book that I'm going to suggest maybe was very influential for me. William, I know you know. It's the kind of book that leaves you asking, where did I leave my towel? Are these things really possible? Is the universe that insane? Have you ever actually read The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy? I'm not talking about watching the recent Hollywood movie, and by recent I think it's like, what, 12 years ago, 15 years ago at this point. I'm not talking about watching the movie, although the movie's entertaining and I do watch it on a pretty regular basis. Well, listen to it in the background while I'm playing video games and stuff. But no, and I'm not talking about the BBC radio series, and I'm not talking about the BBC television series, and I'm not talking about the LP records of the story that they put out. I'm talking about the trilogy in 5 parts, including Mostly Harmless, and all of those wonderful little, they're not big books, they're just little tiny books that make up this series. But I learned something really, really important from reading The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy that I really didn't quite figure out before, and it was causing me a lot of stress. The reality is that I was taking life far, far, far too seriously. Now, if you've watched my channel at all over the last, well, June of 2012, so 5 years, 5.5 years, you've probably come to the realization that I don't take life all that seriously, and you'd be right. I mean, I do, there are things that need to be dealt with, and there are things that need to be prioritized, and you know, some things need to be taken seriously. But for the most part, most things don't need to be taken anywhere near as seriously as most people take them. And a lot of the problems that they have in life are how seriously they take trivial things, and how much importance they place on things that in 5 minutes will not matter. In 5 years, you won't even remember. So what's the point? But I learned to relax, we'll say, through The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and it made a huge, huge difference. So that's 2 books. Well, 6 if you count the fact that The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is like 5 books and a little compendium book that I've got. But it's a solid, singular hardcover in my collection, so it's 2 books. And in the name of keeping this video kind of short so that YouTube can flag it right away and they won't have to watch the whole thing first, I'm just going to really quickly wrap this up with the 3rd book that made a huge difference to the way I look at things, and that is Roshelka. A lot of you will have never heard of that book, and I'm not surprised. C.J. Shariah, I'm probably pronouncing that name wrong, is a really well-written book. It explores some really interesting Russian folklore and, you know, dabbles in the Ukrainian, and just, it's really, really fascinating. And the thing that I took away from that book, ultimately, well, there are 2 things that I took away from that book. One is I wish I had a jug of vodka that was never less than half full and completely unbreakable. And the second thing is I have learned to be very careful for what I wish for, because you never know, and sometimes you can like absent-mindedly make a wish. Oh, I wish I had blank, and get it, and then you turn around and realize, I really, really didn't want that. In point of fact, I'm now handicapped by having this thing. It is making my life a bloody nightmare. And, you know, again, I read it a few times. This is, I've got it upstairs, actually, in the bedroom, right beside the bed. It's one of the ones on the bookshelf there. But, yeah, I learned from that I really need to be more careful with what I invest my energy into, what I direct my desire at. Because what you chase, what you pursue, what you actively strive towards is what you're gonna get. That's part of why I'm not a big fan of worrying, because you're putting a lot of energy into negative possibilities, and all you're doing by energizing them is giving them more power, either in your head or in your reality, neither of which is a worthwhile use of personal power. So why bother, you know? Now it might seem, considering this is basically a garden with a hint of variety channel, that me commenting on these 3 books, well, series of books, that have made such a significant difference to my life is completely irrelevant. And in many ways you'd be right. But as gardeners, and most of us that watch my videos, and anyway, are gardeners, which leads to a certain percentage of guitar players, and pranksters, and pepperheads, not necessarily in that order, but they all seem to combine, don't they? But a lot of us in the garden find ourselves wishing adamantly that X would happen, or we could just grow Y, and while we're so busy wishing for those things, we often miss out on just how amazing other things are in the garden, you know? Like, I am obsessed about these peppers, right? I want to grow hot peppers. I want to grow hot peppers in one of the shortest seasons on the planet, and I'm going to do it, God darn it. But am I noticing how amazing my tomatoes grew last year? I mean, a little bit, obviously. I ate them, so they saved me money. I was pretty happy about that. But if I was so busy focusing on the fact that last year's peppers didn't grow, I would not have been able to enjoy the couple of pumpkins that I got, the couple of acorn squash, the cucumbers, the beans, the peas, all of these other little things I would have missed out on the actual enjoyment of, because I was so frustrated by my inability to get what I was actively wishing for. So I think, personally, as gardeners, it is a good thing to be careful what you wish for. I think, as gardeners, it is a good thing to know why you're doing things. Are you planting it this way because your mother did, and because her mother did, and did her mother do it because that was the only way that would work? You know, it's kind of a funny story. I'm sure the kids are absolutely sick and tired of hearing it, but there's kind of a funny story I'm going to share with you here, and then we're going to wrap this up like I said I was going to do a couple minutes ago. But it's the story of a boyfriend and girlfriend, and the girlfriend has decided she's going to make dinner for her boyfriend. So she goes into the kitchen, starts frying up some ham, but before she throws it into the frying pan, she cuts all the edges off of it. And he's looking at it going, well, that's interesting, but I like the edges, so why'd you cut the edges off? She's just like, well, I always did that because my mother always did that. So a little while later, he's got the opportunity. They're having dinner over at her parents' place. And he asks her, so tell me, why is it that you cut the edges off the ham before you cook it up? And she's like, well, I don't know, I've just always done that because that's what my mother did. A little further on in the relationship, he's got the opportunity to have dinner at grandmother's house. And he asks her, so why do you cut the edges off the ham? And she looked him dead in the eye and she's like, well, I had no choice. It wouldn't fit in the pan any other way. Now, while that is a thoroughly ridiculous story, there is a hugely important message in that. Analyze why you're doing things. Be aware of why you're doing things. And you're going to live a happier life. You're going to have more success in the things that you're reaching towards. You're more likely to get those goals if you know why you're chasing them. And yeah, that is where I'm going to let number 22 go to rest. Take care, everybody. I will see you tomorrow. Maybe we'll talk about the jobs that Mr. Bear has done, because they've kind of had a lot to do with making me who I am as well. So, yeah. Today's Friday, tomorrow's Saturday, Sunday's a garden update. Saturday, we're going to talk about the jobs of Mr. Bear. I will see you guys then. Don't forget to stop and check out any channels that I may or may not have listed up around the edges here. Somewhere along here, there's going to be a best reviewer video. Most of you who are fairly loyal will have probably already seen it. But yeah, like, go check out some of the other channels, because what I'm doing now, since nobody's throwing down the comments, is, hey, I'm trying to grow my channel so I can beat, you know, Adpocalypse, and I can make it. I'm going through my comments, and if somebody has commented, I open a new link. If they've got an active channel, bam, they're there until those 3 spots are filled. So it pays to comment, pays to be active on your channel, and it pays to check out some of these other new channels, because I love watching new channels grow, and you do too, I'm pretty sure, or else why are you here, right? Alright, I'll see you guys tomorrow.